At exactly 4:12 a.m. on July 24, 2025, the city of Natanz experienced a moment in history that would echo far beyond its borders. There, in the pre-dawn hush, the black sky over the heart of Iran's nuclear program pulsed with unnatural light. A shockwave followed, subtle at first. Doors rattled, glass panes shivered, a tremor in the ground. Then chaos. Alarms wailed, radios hissed with broken static, mobile networks blinked out. Within the hour, fragments of the truth emerged from the smoke. The state broadcaster cut through the speculation. The Natanz nuclear complex had been bombed. Not a malfunction, not an accident. An act of war, deliberate and devastating. By sunrise, Iran was not simply waking, it was transforming. Overnight, the region had slipped across a threshold, a familiar world now balanced on the edge of calamity. Across the Mediterranean, in Jerusalem, the Israeli Prime Minister's office delivered its message. A few sentences, cold and unyielding. Iran's nuclear program has become an existential threat to the region. There was no explicit claim of responsibility. None was required. All it took was a glance at the satellite imagery, picked apart by analysts from Berlin to Washington, a trail of radar signatures tracing the flight of F-35I Aegir jets as they carved a silent route through Iraqi skies. Natanz was not the only casualty. Fordow, the subterranean labyrinth where Iranian engineers had once boasted of their progress, was struck hard. Explosive force rocked the ancient soil of Isfahan, sending plumes of smoke and enriched dust rising into the sky. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, Natanz alone had lost 85% of its operational capacity. 3 nuclear facilities lay crippled. The possibility of radiation drift forced border closures, triggered international safety alerts, and set panic in motion across the Middle East. Just weeks before, intelligence estimated Iran held over 5 metric tons of enriched uranium, enough by some counts for 5 or more warheads. Now, with fissile material at risk and containment systems breached, a new danger had been set loose, one not measured in megatons, but in fear. Retribution came swiftly. Iranian President Ali Akbari, unflinching before the cameras, delivered a speech bathed in the blue glow of a nation's grief and anger.
This is not just an attack on Iran. It is an attack on peace, on international law, on humanity itself.
The message broadcast across 5 continents left little doubt. Isolation was over. This would be answered. Hours later, the retort arrived in fire and thunder. 72 ballistic missiles arced from Iranian launch pads into the night, streaking westward towards Israeli cities, Haifa, Tel Aviv, the Negev. Israel's Iron Dome leapt into action, a ballet of countermeasures, explosions blossoming in the sky. Most threats were intercepted, but not all. 7 missiles broke through. 4 civilians lost their lives, 22 were wounded, and beneath the smoldering remains of damaged buildings, a nation tallied the cost of its defense. The eruption did not pause at these borders. Within a day, the conflict spilled outward, fanned by old rivalries and hardened loyalties. Hezbollah fired 18 rockets from Lebanon, flares of defiance across the heavily patrolled frontier. In Yemen, Houthi drones hunted commercial vessels flying Israeli flags in the Red Sea, raising stakes along global shipping lanes. Shiite militias in Iraq, sensing opportunity or obligation, pledged vengeance against American troops. Each movement, a tremor in the fragile web of regional security, sent aftershocks rippling through the world's markets and mines. Oil, the lifeblood of the global economy, surged by 27%. Investors shifted in their seats as Brent crude climbed past $107 per barrel, a figure unvisited in over a decade. Arms manufacturers saw their stock prices whirl upward. In contrast, the price of certainty plummeted, airlines rerouted, embassies evacuated staff, and the world braced for what might come next. In Washington, silence stretched for 2 days, a void heavy with meaning. Then, as if the weight could no longer be borne, the U.S. National Security Advisor, John Mitchell, faced the world's cameras.
The bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities has created a direct and unacceptable risk to global security. the United States stands with its allies.
Hard words followed by harder action. The aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush entered the Persian Gulf. Pentagon officials spoke of limited strategic strikes aimed at preventing Iran from reactivating its nuclear infrastructure. Just after midnight on July 27th, the next phase began. 60 cruise missiles raced towards targets. Iraq's heavy water reactor, the military bastion at Parchin, storage depots near Bushehr. The Pentagon insisted these were only active nuclear sites. Tehran insisted civilians had died. The world's patience, already stretched, neared breaking. At the United Nations, the Secretary General called an emergency session, warning that global peace now faced an existential test. Beijing and Moscow pointed accusing fingers at Washington. The European Union, caught between outrage and impotence, pleaded for restraint. Yet all parties stood on the same perilous chessboard. The rules, it seemed, had changed. Permanence had yielded to peril, deterrence to escalation. Every action was now both a move and a message. Beneath the headlines and diplomatic theater, lives changed. Flight paths shifted, migration plans rewritten, Bitcoin cratered, gold soared. For billions, the war was not just in bombs or broadcasts, but in the tension behind every decision, every transaction, every whispered fear. 3 days into the new era, one question extended beyond borders and policy. Was this an overture or the last act? Was history being written anew or merely repeating, now with stakes too high to imagine? In the wake of fire and reckoning, the world could only watch the horizon, breath held, waiting for what would come next. In New York, the United Nations convened not for debate, but for a last, desperate appeal. We stand today not at a crossroads, but at the edge of an abyss. The machinery of war is in motion, oiled by pride and fueled by fear. Each missile launched, each life lost, pushes us closer to a global conflagration from which there will be no return. I speak not to nations, but to the people they represent. Is this the legacy we choose to leave? A world scorched by our failures? An epitaph written in ash? I implore you, step back from the brink. Choose dialogue over destruction. Choose our shared future over our separate pasts. The world is watching. History will judge us. Let us not be found wanting. Silence followed the storm. A hush fell over the halls of power, the war rooms, the capitals of the world. Not a message of victory nor one of surrender, but a quiet mutual understanding. The warships turned, the missile silos closed their doors. The world had stepped back from the abyss, but the ground at the edge was unstable. The fever of war had broken, but the world was left weakened, scarred, and forever changed. A new fragile quiet settled, not peace, but a pause. A long, uncertain breath held by all of humanity, waiting for the sunrise of a day they had almost lost.